Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. The Canadians get a 3-2 loss, unfortunately, against the Washington Capitals. And what was a tough game. The Canadians definitely, found their way through the game early. They were playing really well to start. But, the Capitals are a really solid team in their own right. They're not going to go away quietly. And unfortunately, we weren't able to put up enough of our own, goals in the opening two periods to be able to survive the onslaught that they were giving us in that third period there. I thought, we had a pretty good, solid game, all things considered. We just couldn't really capitalize on some of our offensive chances that would have made the difference at the end of the day. Montembeault, felt like played a really solid game there. Like a lot of our guys had solid nights. It's just, we weren't really able to generate our offense. And, when we have goals scoring from Josh Anderson and Brendan Gallagher and nobody else, it feels a little bit like 2021 and not a whole lot like 2026 for the Canadians. And that's kind of a problem. We'd love to see some of our top guys getting on the score sheet a little bit, not for lack of chances, of course. I feel like, the Canadians had a lot of opportunities to score goals in this game. We just couldn't really find a way to put enough past Thompson there in that game. So, and that's kind of been, an issue as well. I feel like we tend to, really take the pace to the other team and dominate, but we don't necessarily finish as much as we'd like to. And that's kind of giving us some limitations in, the amount of games we can win, the amount of points we can get in our standings. But overall, I thought it was a solid game. Definitely some mistakes here and there. Both goals that, all three goals that Washington scored in this game were kind of either on tips or just like in that overtime frame. It's like a rebound. It's a tough goal, and stuff like that goes in all the time. You can't really blame anybody too much for it. I feel like the Capitals played a really solid game. They found a way to come back in this one. The Canadians just needed to do a better job of, putting the game out of reach a little bit, scoring a couple more goals in those opening two periods, in the third period as well. Would have helped us out a little bit, win this one in regulation. But alas, we do still get a point out of it. As I mentioned before, that's a huge deal. Even if we're not getting those 2 points every single night, it is still, super valuable for the Canadians to get points whenever they can, especially considering how well, everybody else in the Atlantic is playing right now. Like, we absolutely need every point that we could possibly muster right now. So getting that extra one is definitely helpful. As we look at the standings right now, currently as I'm recording, Detroit is losing 2-0 to the Boston Bruins. Obviously, we don't want Boston getting points, but we definitely don't want Detroit getting points. So it's helpful that they are losing here. Tampa ended up winning their game in a shootout, so they take the top Atlantic spot with 61. We were only, 2 points away from Tampa at 59 points ourselves. Obviously, as I mentioned again, that 1 point that we get from this overtime loss definitely helping us out there, as is all of the other points that we're getting this season. So, but you look at the wild card situation right now, 2 Atlantic teams in the wild card right now with 53 and 52 points. So we're only 6 points ahead of Toronto right now, in that third Atlantic spot, and I don't see either Toronto or Buffalo slowing down as of right now. Toronto on a 4-game winning streak. Buffalo just lost one, but they're 8-2-0 in their last 10. So got to continue to find a way to win games and play solid hockey here. So again, like that point is huge, but we got to be able to bounce back in our next game here. But focusing on this game for a little bit, obviously Josh Anderson gets an unassisted shorthanded goal in the first period. Like way to kill this entire game. Our penalty kill was absolutely unreal. We were just like completely frustrating them. They didn't score at all on the power play in this game, so that was really helpful for us. Unfortunately, we didn't score on our power play opportunities, which we had 4 of. So that kind of didn't help a lot either. But, for Josh Anderson to score a shorthanded goal, just kind of stripping the puck going all the way down the ice and ripping one past the goaltender is a big deal. And, that held as, the only goal scoring for a while. Then Brendan Gallagher scores his 4th of the season off of a nice pass from Deneau and Zach Bolduc. Brendan Gallagher gets his 4th goal of the season there. Deneau his 9th assist, and Bolduc his 8th assist. So another great play there, just finding Gallagher out front of the net. And he's able to just kind of like handle that and just throw it into the net. It was a nice play. I mean, like a nice like kick pass again as well. A lot of that is going on recently, guys like kicking the pucks to each other, and it's working out pretty well. So it's good to see, guys in that bottom six generating goal scoring and all that kind of stuff. As I mentioned before, it would be nice if that was in addition to some of our top six guys also scoring goals in games like this. But unfortunately, it doesn't seem like every game can be like the Vancouver one where we're firing on all cylinders. Even in that one, obviously, we had Carrier scoring 2 goals there. So, you would like to see in this game for sure our top guys getting on the score sheet a little bit. But that doesn't quite work out that way. But that was all the goal scoring for the Canadiens. And then Ethan Frank scores 2 goals in the third period. One goes off of his body and in, the other one off of his stick and in. Neither one of those are really something you can fault anybody for. It's just, like unfortunate luck with that bounces being the right way, and just a nice play on that last goal there and in the final 2 minutes of the game to tip one past Montembeault. Those are tough goals. I'm not going to blame anybody for those ones. And then in overtime, it's tough to get a penalty in overtime. They didn't score on the penalty, but they scored, a little while after that. Just, the Canadiens are tired, and they're just, throwing pucks on net, and they finally get a rebound that goes home. So it's unfortunately the way that works out, but the Canadiens didn't have a whole lot of offensive opportunities in overtime. I felt like the reason why we got that penalty in the first place is because Matheson decided to go onto the far wing. I don't really understand why that's the decision being made. He was playing his defensive position back behind the play, but he stepped up to be that winger on the left side, and what ended up happening was the winger on the the inside beat Suzuki. And went in, which would have been a breakaway because Matheson wasn't there anymore, and that caused, Suzuki to have to trip him up to avoid that breakaway to form. So we're honestly lucky that we didn't get a penalty shot on that one, but 2 minutes on the penalty kill in overtime is definitely not ideal. And I think that's kind of all the momentum that they needed to kind of wear us down and eventually score after the penalty was over. So yeah, in general, as I was saying, I don't really feel too upset about this loss in general. I feel like we played a pretty solid game. I think that the biggest difference maker right now is just the fact that we're not, generating as much goal scoring as we'd like to be in this one. I feel like everybody else, especially goaltending, I thought was solid. We just need to get our top guys, specifically Caulfield, Suzuki, those guys, to start generating some more offense, because when they are at, the top of their game, the rest of the team certainly is. So that's pretty much all I have for this one. The only other thing I wanted to mention is the power play. 0 for 4 in this one for a power play that was at top 5 in the NHL at one point. I'm not sure where we currently stand, but I don't understand the rationale of taking Lane Hudson off of the top power play unit. Doesn't really make any sense to me. Lane Hudson is what makes our power play good, in my opinion, and no shade at all to Noah Dobson, but I feel like the versatile offensive skills that Lane Hudson possesses is what it makes him a great power play quarterback, and I don't really understand the rationale of putting him on power play 2. I feel like Martin St. Louis is making a whole lot of weird decisions about our power play and who's on it and who's not, and I feel like at the very least, I feel like those decisions and those changing up of the lines is messing up that power play chemistry. I just don't really understand what the rationale is behind taking, what is arguably our best player in Lane Hudson. Obviously, Nick Suzuki is probably our best player, but, Lane Hudson is definitely, in that conversation for the most impactful player on this team. Taking him off that top unit, I just don't really think makes sense. And I feel like it really just limits our, our ability to move the puck around and, be more agile on that top unit. So I'm not a huge fan of that. I mean, I do understand when things aren't going well, we're not having a whole lot of success, it makes sense that we'd want to, mix things up a little bit and see what sticks. But, in this case, I just don't really feel like that worked. And I feel like I would like personally to see it go back to, Lane Hudson on that top unit. I feel like that's just the way that it should be. And I feel like that's the way that, we're going to have the most amount of success. But, other than that, that's pretty much my notes on this one. It's a tough one, but, again, a huge way to get 2 points in this one. We absolutely needed those 2 points, or sorry, that 1 point in the overtime frame there. Obviously, we would love to get 2, as I accidentally said there, but you do what you can, and I feel like if we can play every game and get a point at least in every single one from here on out, I think we'll be a playoff team. So as long as we can continue to fight for every point that we can possibly get going forward, I think we'll be in a solid position here. But That's pretty much all for this one. The Canadians play their next game in Buffalo on Thursday. Buffalo is a really hot team right now. I feel like they're definitely bound to come back down to earth at some point, but that might not be as soon as Thursday. So we'll definitely have our hands full playing them, a team that is desperate to make the playoffs, haven't made it since 2011 or whatever it is. So we gotta be ready to go. Use our rest day wisely and get back to work on Thursday. So yeah, that's pretty much all I have for this one. So thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you after hopefully 2 points and a big win, a big Atlantic Division win against the Sabres.